Imagine this. You're going to class 4 days a week, spending thousands of dollars, and then dedicating hours upon hours of your time just to have nothing to show for it. I know it seems very unmotivational having that happen to you, but the reality is, it happens to millions of students every single year. You might be asking yourself, how? Well, the answer to that question is quite simple. It's placement testing. Millions of people are affected negatively from placement testing every single year, and in order to see these students' true potential, we must first stop judging one's knowledge off of a placement test. This topic personally resonates with me as I'm a person who cannot test well for reasons I will soon come to explain later. I am hopeful that through this speech you will see how placement testing discriminates against certain communities and how they hinder your success, and ultimately how these tests are inaccurate and ineffective. Now, let's test the waters and see the diverse groups of people that placement testing negatively affects. Placement testing discriminates against a vast majority of people of all kinds of different races, ethnicities, and religions. There is no set group that isn't affected by placement testing. A huge default in the system is that the education system are using these tests to test ESL students or English second language students. And now the reason why that's such a big deal is because these tests have countless of words and phrases that have significantly different meanings in their languages and in their cultures. Therefore, because of that, students get these answers wrong, in which if they could have just had an explanation or a better understanding of the wording, they could have very well answered the question correctly. Along with, prior education is another huge factor. There are millions of people who don't have access to good schools or a good education. People from low-income areas are set up to fail these exams because a lot of the material they have never even seen before. And it's not their fault, it's the education that they had access to which set them back. Another huge group which suffers from placement testing are people with mental disabilities. There are many conditions that millions of people have that make them much less prone to being successful on such exams. Such conditions being anxiety, ADHD, minor autism, and many more. I struggle with having ADHD myself, and it affects how I perform in this modern education system. I've been hindered and I've been placed into remedial math classes in which I've breezed by with no challenge whatsoever. And I say this to show my personal experience with these tests that they don't accurately determine one's knowledge. And I say this because 65% of you in this class have thought that placement testing determines one's knowledge. Now, to continue with, I've talked about the different groups of people that are negatively affected. Now let's talk about the ways these people and others are effective. So, overall, placement testing is more like to hinder your success as a student. And I say this because, according to the editors at the Huffington Post, up to 85% of college students in California are placed into remedial math. And out of the 85% in remedial math, only 6% fail versus the much higher 12 to 20% failing regular math classes. Also, more studies are being released on how placing students in remedial classes will actually hinder their whole entire academic career. The reason why is because these classes just take people's times and money, and they give them absolutely nothing to show for it until they can make it into their regular level classes. According to Atlantic Media, students who are in remedial classes are 4 times less likely to graduate college. So, now you know why we need to get rid of placement testing, so here's a few new ways that we can avoid the problem of entry-level exams. So, judging a sense of knowledge off of a placement testing is ludicrous. We should be looking at high school grades instead of giving them tests. High school grades far more accurately determine one's knowledge because they show how the student actually performs in a classroom and not just on any random given exam. Since nearly a third of people are getting placed too low on the spectrum, we need to implement a system where they can move up to a class if they aren't having to truly work hard, such as an example being in my math class where I breeze by and don't have any work to do at all. They could just let me go up into a higher class if I'm not getting a challenging education in these lower classes. So, ultimately, it's your college experience, so if you want to move up in the class, you should be able to, as long as you know the consequences if it turns out that you can't handle it. But for many people, they will be able to handle it. Another very viable solution is to get rid of prereqs. For most classes, so they can feel challenged. Let the students challenge themselves, because when students are getting bored, then they lose interest, and even if the material is easy, they're not feeling challenged and they're not going to try. If you let them skip prereqs, they will be more inclined to learn more outside of the classroom and actually care about their education. Now, in conclusion, by following these steps, we can get rid of the old, unreliable ways that we test people and find a better, more effective way of properly placing someone in the right class. Knowing that this isn't the most effective way to test individuals, we should implement a new way. And just as Albert Einstein once said, I quote, "Everyone is a genius, but if you judge a fish off its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid." End quote. Everyone is different in their own ways. Our education system only tests one of those ways, leaving millions of kids feeling inadequate and stupid. So instead of placement testing, we must find a solution that works for all people.